If you spend enough time online, you'll inevitably hear the same stories about the pyramids. According to the internet, these monuments were built overnight using levitation, lost acoustic technology, or direct instructions from extraterrestrials. But the actual archaeological record paints a completely different picture. The people who dragged these stones through the sand didn't have access to alien lasers. They were regular humans who messed up, constantly. We are used to seeing the flawless monuments printed on postcards. What usually gets ignored are the shattered remains, the lopsided structures, and the abandoned building sites scattered all across the Egyptian landscape. To understand why they kept building despite these massive structural failures, you have to look at their environment. In ancient Egypt, life was entirely dictated by the Nile River. When it flooded on schedule, crops thrived. When it didn't, the result was widespread famine. This constant threat of environmental collapse led to a belief system centered around a concept called Ma'at, meaning cosmic order or harmony. The Egyptians believed the universe was constantly teetering on the edge of chaos, and the only person who could maintain Ma'at was the pharaoh, a living god on earth. To ensure the river flooded each year, that god needed to survive into the afterlife, which required his body to be perfectly preserved inside an unmistakable, eternal fortress. To the workers hauling the limestone, dragging massive blocks across the desert was a collective survival strategy. Secure the tomb, protect the king, and you guarantee the next harvest. The path to those iconic shapes didn't start with pyramids at all. Early rulers were buried in mastabas, simple, rectangular brick buildings with flat roofs and sloping walls. Their primary function was simply to bury the sarcophagus deep enough to keep grave robbers away from the mummy. Around 2600 BCE, an architect named Imhotep decided to push the limits for Pharaoh Djoser. He took the standard rectangular tomb and stacked another one on top of it, and then another. The result was a massive stone staircase reaching 62 meters into the sky. Subsequent rulers tried to improve on that step design, with disastrous results. At Maitum, builders attempted to fill in the steps to create a smooth-sided structure, but the heavy outer layers couldn't hold. The weight crushed the hollow interior, and gravity won, leaving behind an exposed inner core surrounded by a mountain of its own rubble. This diagram shows exactly what happened when Pharaoh Sneferu tried to build a massive, perfectly smooth pyramid at a steep 54-degree angle. Halfway through construction, the blocks simply became too heavy to support themselves. The immense downward pressure caused the base to sink, and deep cracks tore through the limestone chambers. To save the entire project from collapsing into dust, the engineers made an emergency adjustment on the fly. They drastically reduced the slope for the rest of the build, dropping the angle to 43 degrees, allowing the remaining weight to safely distribute into the ground. And here is the physical result of that mid-construction panic. The bent pyramid stands today with a highly distinctive, crooked profile. It looks incredibly awkward, but it didn't fall down. When you look at these cracked and twisted monuments, the narrative of an advanced, magical civilization falls apart. These structures are the physical receipts of a society figuring out basic structural geometry the hard way. Once they nailed the angles, they still had to solve the massive problem of labor. For centuries, a popular myth claimed these stones were hauled up by armies of enslaved people, a story popularized by Greek historians living long after the pyramids were built. Modern archaeology reveals a completely different supply chain. Excavations near the monuments have uncovered bustling worker villages, complete with bakeries, breweries, and livestock farms. The labor force consisted of permanent, highly skilled craftsmen, supported by tens of thousands of seasonal farmers, who performed this construction as a civic duty while their fields were flooded. This split screen illustrates the simple physics hack they used to move millions of massive stones across the desert. On dry sand, dragging a heavy sled creates a pileup of friction in front of the runners. By pouring a small amount of water directly in front of the sled, the sand binds together. It becomes slick, literally cutting the required pulling force in half. Logistics logs recovered from ancient officials show they bypassed long overland routes entirely. The Egyptians dug specific canals connecting the Nile to the construction sites, allowing ships to float hundreds of heavy limestone blocks right to the base of the pyramids every single month. Decades of physical trial, error, and meticulous supply planning culminated during the reign of Khufu. By applying a safe, sustainable angle from the very first stone, his engineers successfully built a monument 146 meters tall, weighing over 5 million tons. The immense scale of Giza represents the peak of this organizational machine, a testament to what tens of thousands of humans achieve through relentless, parallel teamwork. For all that incredible architectural effort, every single pyramid failed its primary objective. Placing a giant, shining mountain of white limestone over a king's burial chamber functioned as an unmissable billboard for grave robbers. The tombs were continuously looted and stripped of their treasures. Because of this vulnerability, combined with extreme climate droughts that fractured the state economy, later Egyptian rulers abandoned the pyramid shape entirely. They retreated deep into the mountains, carving their final resting places into the remote, hidden cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. Despite having a clear, documented history of how and why these structures were assembled, modern culture remains obsessed with looking for alternative explanations. We continue to debate extraterrestrial intervention or ancient cast concrete, as if hauling heavy stone is somehow an impossible task for human beings. Assigning these achievements to the supernatural actively disrespects the people who built them. It ignores the complex math, the broken bones, and the brilliant logistical networks that a Bronze Age society engineered through sheer willpower. The pyramids stand as a record of human labor, shaped by centuries of back-breaking effort and the persistence to learn from every catastrophic collapse.